La manzana.
La manzana.
Juan come manzanas.
Juan come manzanas.
Él es un niño.
Él es un niño. I took Spanish for 3 years in college. I've been to a couple of Spanish-speaking countries. I still am not confident in my Spanish language skills.
Buenos días.
It's insane. It's insane. It's beautiful. You know, you really start to learn a lot about people and their motivations, like how alliances shift constantly throughout the show, how people, you know, really get gripped by anxiety, by depression, by trauma. It was just so beautiful, so raw. Something that I feel like you just wouldn't really see on American TV.
Hola, soy Taylor y bienvenidos de nuevo al Film Nuts podcast. I'm going to start off this episode with a bit of an existential question. Who are you? Vague, I know, but seriously, how do you define who you are? Me? You probably know me as a podcaster, but just like you, I'm not just that. I'm a significant other, a son, a dog dad, an ocean conservationist, a whiskey drinker, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm human. You're human. We are more than just one thing. So, if we're talking about a show about a group of bank robbers, what other things should we consider about who they might be? Well, that brings us to today's topic, the Spanish language Netflix show La Casa de Papel, or Money Heist. It's a thrilling, captivating, and multi-layered show that puts every character's humanity on full display. And that is why it is a favorite of my guest today. Angela Holloway is a visual storyteller and podcaster whose work ranges from the great outdoors to human rights to small business success stories. We ended up having a great conversation about what defines us, the pros and cons of entrepreneurship, and the beautiful moments in Money Heist that highlight humanity better than most American TV shows. Throughout this episode, you'll hear interview footage from Money Heist star Alvaro Morte, as well as Spanish language excerpts from the show, hence why I was attempting to speak Spanish earlier. So, vamonos! Here's Angela Holloway talking about Money Heist on the Film Nuts podcast.
I'm happy, and I have no complaints. Tuesday, today is also the day that my video podcast drops weekly, so that's what I've been working on. The name of my video podcast is Honey and Hustle. We are knee deep in season 3. I'm super excited for the growth that's happened since season 1, particularly in the audio space and just with the setup and with just the continual consistency of it and growth of it. So that's what I've been working on lately.
So tell me a little bit about Honey and Hustle. I mean, especially for me, I've checked out a couple episodes. I like it. And I'm sure there are other people that don't know what I'm talking about. So give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah. So Honey and Hustle is a video podcast featuring storytelling interviews where I sit down with nonprofit founders, creative entrepreneurs, small business owners. And for season 3 specifically, I'm sitting down with them here in Durham. So there are people who are in and around the Triangle. So really kind of local focused show right now. But previous seasons have featured people who from all over the US and Canada. So a really broad sweep of people from all different backgrounds, all different industries, just coming together, sharing their stories, what's worked for them, their successes, and how just really being a business owner has shaped their perspective on life and on themselves and things that they've learned along the way. So
that's awesome. What made you want to start that?
So I'm originally from Alabama. and that's where I started my business, NJ Studio. And in Alabama, there's really not a lot of opportunities to meet people, specifically mentors or
Mm.
people that will share freely their experience with you, especially if they don't know you from Adam.
Mhm.
And then I moved here to the Triangle, and it was like a whole different ballgame. There were so many people that were just willing to be open and share with me open and honestly about, things that work for them, things that they would suggest that I try. And I was like, you know what? It really shouldn't depend on where you live, the level of access that you have to this kind of information. Because really having access to information can really dramatically affect how fast and how efficiently your business can grow and how you can grow as a person. And so I really wanted Honey and Hustle to be part of that equalizer, part of that free education space that people could go to and learn without actually having to move, without having to spend a whole lot of money to have access to a person's time, knowledge, or expertise. So
Mm. Wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. What's been the most challenging part about it?
keeping it consistent. It is a lot of work
Yeah.
to produce a show, to produce a quality show, to continue to grow, to continue to, just really make the experience great for both the listener and the guest. And so that's been a challenge, but it's been a healthy challenge, and I've enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about what you wanted to talk about on the show, normally, even if I don't particularly know our guest well enough, like personally, I try to find some kind of dots to connect between themselves and what they want to talk about. And for the life of me, I have no idea why you want to talk about Money Heist. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just super curious to find out why this is something you wanted to talk about today.
Money Heist, to me, if we're talking top tier TV, we're talking from cinematography to script to music score to just any, audio engineering. To me, hands down, best show out there.
Mm.
Like, and I can't explain it, but that just, I don't know, as a cinematographer, someone who wants to get better at all aspects of filmmaking,
Mhm.
that show just really speaks to me. I didn't realize it was in Spanish when I started watching it, but I do speak Spanish. So I was like, cool, I can go with this. Like we can do this.
So you're fluent in Spanish?
I wouldn't say fluent, but I studied Spanish for like 10 years. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, I can say a thing or two. I've been to a couple Spanish speaking countries. So.
Okay. I watched it with subtitles because I know like a little Spanish, but obviously not enough to be fluent to watch it without subtitles.
All good.
So what got you into the show? Like what made you was it random or was it recommended? Like how did you get into it?
Yeah, it was recommended to me on Netflix, and I was like, you know what, I got time. Let's try it out. And then I got hooked like unexpectedly. And yeah, I was in it from season 1. I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And at the time, they were releasing 2 seasons at a time, and so season 1 and season 2 were there, and I watched that, and I was like, I gotta watch it again. And so I watched it again. It's just one of those shows that just it gets you hooked, so you can sink your teeth into it, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. Like, how did somebody write this? It's gripping.
Mm.
Yeah.
What about it? I mean, you mentioned like kind of the filmmaking things, but what else kind of hooked you to this show?
So one thing that I would say that stood out to me when I first started watching it is Money Heist is about a heist in the Bank of Spain. And so, it's written like you would think, okay, a heist, they go in, they grab the money, they get out. No, this is like this elaborately planned heist that was intentionally meant to go on for days. So some episodes cover maybe 10 hours of the heist. Some episodes covered only 1 hour. How do you write a show that's so gripping that it covers like 1 hour of a heist? Like, it's insane. It's insane. It's beautiful. You really start to learn a lot about people and their motivations, like how alliances shift constantly throughout the show, how people, really get gripped by anxiety, by depression, by trauma, by how things change within a heist. It was just so beautiful, so raw, something that I feel like you just wouldn't really see on American TV. Just like the realness and the rawness of people's emotions, about how people aren't as afraid to say like, I know I'm not perfect, I know what I'm about to do is not great, but this is what needs to be done in order to maintain order in this heist, or this is what needs to be done to show people that I'm in charge here, or this is what needs to be done in order to keep the police off our back. Like, this is it's so real, and I think it's also just tells you a lot about how characters can be complex. I really like complex characters, and again, I'm not saying you can't see this in American TV, but I do feel like American writers and American TV producers in general shy away from showing the badness in someone if they're not trying to show them as a bad person.
Hmm.
And I think, the reality is that, people can do bad things and have bad thoughts and say bad things and not be bad people at the end of the day. And I think that was what was really gripping about Money Heist and about the movement that it started even outside of the show, was that, they were robbing a bank is not a good thing, but people loved them because they were doing it kind of as a statement against the government and a statement against like poverty. And, I feel like a lot of Americans probably could relate to that, like especially now that gas is going up and rents are continually going up in the triangle, and you're just like, this is the same apartment I lived in last year, why is my rent going up? Or this is the same gas I was using 5 minutes ago, why is it going up? But and it just seems like the government isn't stepping in and doing anything, but they're giving bailouts to other people. And it's not that cut and dry, but it is kind of like a testament of like poor people, the people that I've forgotten about, the people that are cast away in society, just really taking back that power and making a statement. So I don't know. I was rooting for the underdog. I was rooting for, the people that were just being themselves and not, residing into this facade that I have to be XYZ to have a place in society. So
Wow. Is that kind of underdog appeal? Is that something that you gravitate toward when it comes to something to watch, listen to, or make?
somewhat, I think in some level, all of us kind of root for the underdog. Maybe some of us have been the underdog. I think, as people in society, maybe underdog isn't the only word for it. Maybe it's, people who are not always represented in traditional media, right? Maybe it's people who, when they are represented as a certain way, they're represented in a bad way. And, necessarily being a certain way doesn't make you a bad person. Like being a robber doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, right? All these different things. So yeah, these are definitely things that I think catch my eye, and, it's beautiful to see that, people can be complex and be shown in different ways and come out on top,
I think it's getting better and better. Years ago, I had this difference between the American productions and the rest of the world productions. But now I think there's a lot of talent in Europe, in not only in Europe, in South America, in Asia, and now it's being like balanced. It doesn't matter where are you producing. The people from all around the world, they just want quality when they see the shows. And I think nowadays we are getting that level, the same level, like the American people that you know how to do stuff, like movies and TV series and this. I think now it's quite balanced.
With all this, how has the show inspired you at all? Whether it comes like making something or just kind of a general thought.
Yeah, I would say as a creator, I always want to push myself to be better 1% every day, get, 1% better with every video, every photo, every, marketing campaign, no matter what it is. And this show is definitely a spark in the right direction. It's like, wow, like how can I get 2% better at cinematography with every video? How can I get better at creating a music score? How can I get better at introducing Foley and anticipation and suspense into my work and, jubilation? How can I get better at introducing different emotions through audio and my music? How can I get better at really capturing the complexity of people and my subjects? Because nobody's ever just one thing, right? So taking just out of the conversation, really allowing people to represent who they are fully, whether that's quote unquote good or bad, and really getting away from traditional tropes of what is an antagonist, what is a protagonist, what is a hard situation, or, you know, a redeeming situation. So yeah, I think from all standpoints, it really pushed me to just like, I can do better, I can do more, and it can be all of that at one time too. So
I'm noticing this kind of like theme about people being more than one thing. And is the stuff that you make, is that something that you're actively trying to accomplish? Because I feel like it is, but I mean, I'm not you. So I'd like you to tell me about that.
Yeah. So as a lot of my work specifically focuses around documentary filmmaking, and the podcast is kind of an extension of that, because I don't restrict people, you know, in sharing parts of their story. I don't tell them what they can and can't tell me. I don't restrict them from sharing parts of their story that maybe aren't directly related to business, but affected how they perceive themselves as a business owner. And, you know, a lot of documentaries that, you know, I watch and am inspired by, you know, you're watching this person and, you know, specifically focusing on this journey or what they're trying to accomplish in the documentary and what has led them to that point. And, you know, it involves a lot of vulnerability, but what you don't see is, you know, those are just people too. They've made mistakes in life. There are people that they probably have hurt. There are things that they probably have done wrong, due to whatever parts of their personality that maybe they haven't yet worked on. And maybe part of that documentary is seeing them transform and evolve, emotionally and mentally as well. And so I really want to allow a lot of my work to not just be like a part of this perception of what people should be as they're going along their journey, but also all that we are as people and how that manifests over time as we're trying to achieve things. I remember seeing this quote from Chris Do of the Future. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he said, you know, that sometimes a goal isn't as important as the person you become along the way in achieving it. And so I really want to show like that process, like who are you becoming on the way to this goal, not just what is it that you want out of life and in this documentary short film that I'm working on. So
So with all this, like about people having levels, people being complex, was there a point in your life, career, whatever, when this became like a realization to you, almost to the fact like, oh, I should really grasp onto this concept and understand this concept a little bit more?
Yeah. When I was watching, like I said, this show, I think Ava DuVernay had another documentary that released around this time. I think When They See Us was had also come out around this time. And that's more of a docudrama, but oh my God, like when I talk about pulling at your heartstrings and, you know, just really going there, which a lot of her documentaries do, which are really gripping and really raw into the experience that people have. I was just like, how can I recreate these emotions and things that I do? It's not, the stakes are not as high. It's not getting published on Netflix, right? But, you know, the sentiment is the same, that when you build a connection with people, sometimes it's not always the pretty parts of them that you're connecting with, right? You know, everybody can connect to feeling anxiety over starting a new job, right? That's not necessarily pretty, but we understand it. And so just thinking about some of the things that maybe aren't always pretty, but are needed and that people, you know, probably have experienced in their life. I think everybody can relate to happiness. I think that's another thing that I've realized. People can relate to positive things, right? At some point in their life, they've experienced a positive emotion. But how many people would openly share a negative emotion that they've experienced or a negative experience that affected them mentally and emotionally? Probably not a lot, because it's hard to share those things. And so how can we create space for those things to have a place as well, and it not be negative, and it just be a part of who we are and a part of our experience throughout life?
Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to the Film Nuts podcast. Pardon the intrusion, but I've got some pretty exciting news about a different way that you can help support this humble little podcast I've got going on. So I've finally started a Patreon page for the Film Nuts podcast and other storytelling content that I make. Exciting, right? So by becoming a patron, you'll get access to behind the scenes goodies, advanced previews of episodes and videos, as well as our awesome Discord community, affectionately known as the Nut House. There you'll meet fellow fans of storytelling, you'll get to collaborate and pitch episodes and question ideas, and even hang out in weekly watch-alongs of movies and TV shows. For a monthly amount as small or as large as you would like to make, you get access to all that stuff. For more info on becoming a patron, check out the show notes. But there's absolutely no pressure to become a patron. You can still support the Film Nuts podcast by subscribing on your listening platform of choice to stay up to date on all of our episodes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. Again, that helps us get noticed by other awesome people like yourself. Okay, now back to the good stuff. Was there ever a moment where somebody thought like you were one thing and you had to like
Possibly.
not convince, but I mean, hey man,
Yeah.
I'm a person just like you.
Yeah, I think as creators, we all fall into that trap. Creators that do more than one thing. You know, when people meet me through Honey and Hustle, they're like, oh, she hosts a video podcast. And it's like, I do, but I also do, other things. And when they meet me at AJ's studio and I'm working on a film, they're like, oh, she's a filmmaker. And it's like, I am, but I also do all these other things. So I think as creator, and I think that probably is why people hate getting into this content creation versus like, what is my title thing? Like people hate being dumped into a bucket, you know, when they are multifaceted. But, you know, again, I think it's human nature to want to categorize things, you know, going back to just the early days. Is it a threat? Is it a non-threat? Can I identify what this is? And so I don't, you know, have malice for anybody that's, you know, that's just how they identify me, and that's okay too. But, you know, I think part of growing and just, you know, understanding who you are as a person and as a creator is really just about being openly aware of the changes that are happening in your daily life and what you're growing into, right? And really evaluating, is this the type of person or the type of creator that I want to grow into? Is this where I want to see myself and my career going? And so that's just what I think about when I think about myself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously tell you're very career oriented. Like you have goals. I can sense that. Like you've got a lot going on, and there's this entrepreneurial spirit. I can't pronounce that word right for some reason. I can never get it right. But what occurred to me is that, I mean, what would you say if I said that in Money Heist, the professor is an entrepreneur?
Oh, 1,000%. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's got different irons in the fire. He's got backup plans if something doesn't work. This guy is always just thinking and plotting and just like, I need to have my bases covered, like 1,000%. And I think that just goes to like mindset, not to be this podcast bro that's talking about mindset, but like having an entrepreneur. You know what I mean?
Yeah, gotcha.
But like having that entrepreneur mindset isn't restricted to owning a business, you know what I mean? And so I think and people are seeing that even with people who have like 9 to 5s, like you can have that mindset on a 9 to 5 and be really successful and not own your own business. It can lend itself to maybe you later starting your own business, but it doesn't have to. And I think that people are growing into this, like, how can I continually grow my skills? How can I continually have irons in the fire that are growing me as a person and taking care of myself? And that's definitely the professor always thinking.
We wanted to make this character with this charisma, but like doing nothing. I mean, he's a shy guy, he's a closed guy, and he has to convince all these criminal guys to follow him to make this heist. It was very difficult to get it. We're talking about supposed to be the bad guy who is planning all this heist. But once you know him, it's like, it's not really a bad guy. I mean, it's you understand him, you understand the whole band.
Would the professor be the character you might most identify with, or is there another one you would consider?
No, I like the professor. If I had to say the one that I'm most identified with, ironically enough, I don't know, probably either Denver or Helsinki. I know.
Tell me why. Those are two very different, because all three of them, very different characters.
Yeah. So Denver, he is this fun-loving guy. He was just, you know, screwing around, you know, no plan in life. And then he got roped into a heist and kind of as like the muscle, right?
Una puta orden, apúntame, coño, aquí, bien. Y ahora me disparas. ¿Cómo? Que me dispares. Dispárame. Por favor. O me disparas tú o te disparo yo. Te regalo 10 segundos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Son falsas, Arturito. Pero lo ha hecho muy bien. Lo ha hecho muy bien. Te la regalo, te la puedes quedar.
And then he embraces this woman with a kid. He falls in love with the heist, and then during the heist, and then comes back very reluctantly to the next heist because he's dealt with all these life changes during the first heist.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can definitely see his transformation throughout that. I've never had a parent die. Let's just start there. But I just feel like Denver is one of the people, ironically, at the end of the day, who looked at it rationally and from like, what do I have to lose? And then he came to understand, more about himself throughout the heist. And I think that's kind of how I jumped into entrepreneurship. I was like, why not? Like, this sounds fun. And then you start to learn. And then, like when I was younger, and I say younger, I'm 28, but like when I first started, I had a lot more energy. I was going for it, and then as I got older, I was like, okay, I need to get better about my finances. I need to get better about spending. I need to get better about different aspects of running the business and thinking about how I can grow as a creator and all these type of things. And so I feel like he became wise throughout the show, and more of a calculated risk taker than a brute risk taker. And I think that is definitely a transformation that I can understand. I don't know. And I just appreciate him having fun throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's what life should be about. And then Helsinki, he is somebody who was faced with a lot of tough decisions throughout the show.
Helsinki! Helsinki! Helsinki, no! No! ¿De qué sirvió matarla, hijo de puta? ¿De qué sirvió matarla, hijo de puta? Palermo. Helsinki, mírame los ojos. Gordo, mírame los ojos, gordo. ¡Helsinki!
He had to basically kill his brother in arms in the first season or two. And then, he hung out with Nairobi, kind of latched on her, but he was like, yo, I can't be with you because I'm gay. And then he kind of had a little thing with Palermo, which wasn't healthy at first because he treated him like shit. And not that I've been in an abusive relationship, but I just feel like his approach to life has always been going with kindness and wanting to see the best in everyone and wanting to be the best person that he can. And he's like outwardly this very strong person, but he's also one of the most gentle people on the show. And I think that has been something that I've had to come to terms with too, being raised to like be strong all the time and, seek solutions out on my own and not ask for help, but also being expected to be kind of the caretaker and all these types of things. Like you kind of find a balance in yourself with being soft and being open and also finding your own boundaries and asserting those boundaries. And I feel like he found those throughout the show, and he still was able to maintain like being this nice person and this caring person for everybody in his life. And so, yeah, I feel like that's a beautiful thing. As somebody who I feel like some of the hard decisions I've ever had to make have been business related. And I just feel like you can't let those hard decisions or those hard times like harden your heart. And I appreciate Helsinki for being like that. So
do you think that there is this term of like work-life balance? And then there's this idea of like work-life integration. Is there, what do you think about that? I don't even know the question I'm trying to ask. I think I'm just trying to figure out like, where do you land and where do you think are like the best practices? I mean, this is a show where basically it's a job. Like these people have been hired to do a job, and the job is to rob a bank. Now, once they're robbing the bank, that's when we get a look into their lives, both as the heist is continuing and also through the show doing like flashbacks and stuff like that. So is there like, is there a balance there, or is integration kind of the way to go? What do you think?
In the show, I definitely think they integrated it. Like they lived and breathed the heist for months, and then reaped the benefits after. And so, yeah, in the show, definitely integration. In my life, definitely not an integration. I need boundaries, honey. I need time away from my email constantly, just going off. So yeah.
But for these people, not when I say these people, I don't mean the show. People in life, people. There's a toxicity to entrepreneurial culture, I guess, and there's people preaching this kind of like work life integration. It's the constant hustle and all this other stuff, which has its benefits of like the general idea. But why do you think that it could be toxic, and why do you think that toxicity is still so popular for some reason?
When you're first starting a business, it is not unreasonable to think that you will have to spend more than 40 hours a week building it. I think that's just off top. And I don't think there's anything unhealthy about that. I did that when I first started my business. When I moved here, I restarted it because I was in a new place and I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. And you're not going to make money if nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I dove in head first and I was working all the time. That's what I felt like I needed to do to get my business off the ground, and it worked. I will say that there needs to be an explanation about like what that looks like long term. I feel like at first, yeah, it's grind time. You know, you can't just expect for things to just magically appear if you don't put in extra hours to work and to learn, because really it's not just about networking at first or getting money, and it's also about you learning about parts of the business, I think. But over time, as you learn and as things get better, you don't have to spend that amount of time. And I don't think that part of it is explained properly either. Like, you know, there's a time and place for hustling, and there's a time and place for resting and reevaluating and making slower decisions because you're making bigger decisions and that sort of thing. So I think that needs to be explained a little bit better. And then it also needs to be explained based on a case person. If you know, have the income, let's say you're working a full-time job and you're starting it as a side hustle, that's a different, you know, amount of commitment than, you know, a person who maybe lost their job or quit their job and decided to go full-time into, you know, working. So those are two different time level commitments. Those are two different, you know, ways of thinking about hustling. You know what I mean? So there also needs to be some nuance there, which of course is lost on social media. So yeah.
Gotcha. Where does your hustle come from? Did you inherit it from your folks, or was you inspired by a mentor, or like what?
I don't know. That's a good question. I just feel like from a young age, I knew, like, I don't know, my parents told me at 18, I was pretty much on my own. That's not what happened, but that's what they told me. And so I always had it in my mind, like, I got to figure this out. You know what I'm saying? And so I've always been that person that's like, how can I figure it out? There's more than one way to skin a cat. If this way didn't work, maybe I can try this way. And so, and I don't know, I guess naturally, I like solving problems and thinking about even social media. I think about social media and the quote unquote algorithm as just like a problem to be solved. You know what I mean? Like it's a puzzle piece. Like how can I make it work so that I can get engagement, or how can I make it work so that I can get people to talk to me, or whatever it is that gets my work in front of people. And that's the way that I look at business. It's a problem that just like, and a challenge that I'm constantly working towards and that I'll never solve. And that's okay with me. So I think part of it is just being endlessly curious as a person, is what drives me, and just always wanting to be in competition with myself. So the comparison game, yeah, I'll fall victim to it every once in a while, but for the most part, you know, I'm comparing myself to other people's growth timelines and comparing my own growth timeline to that. So it's like, you know, really being in competition with myself and really evaluating how I'm growing and how things are going and where I feel like I'm at in life and where I feel like I should be sometimes. But really that's what it's about for me. Just like, again, being intentional about getting better every day and seeing the results of my efforts of trying and sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, sometimes learning, and that sort of process. And yeah.
I mean, that process is evident in this show for sure. People trying stuff, failing, doing something else. So what was your favorite part of the show? Favorite scene, moment, whatever?
There is a scene in, I want to say it was season 5, where Lisboa was taking a bath and Tokyo was talking with her about, how, highs don't have to be this burden on your relationship. It can really be where you're the most in love, where you're the most connected.
Con el corazón a mí. Vamos, vamos. Entrar ahí.
And Lisboa was like, you're not talking about Rio, right? And Rio was the whole reason they went back into the bank, was to get him out of captivity and out of torture. And she's like, no, I'm not talking about Rio. And I think that moment in and of itself, because from day one, Tokyo was a spitfire, you know what I mean? Just unnecessary risk taker, cannonball, just unpredictable. And even now, Lisboa accused her of just like, you're a spoiled brat. We came back in here for you and you're not even being appreciative. She was doing crazy shit, going off on Rio, going off on trying to kiss Denver, just doing wild shit, being reckless, not being attentive, getting drunk, doing whatever the fuck she wanted because she was hurt. But, it's like her emotions and her faithfulness, her loyalty can be fleeting at times. And I think in that moment, she was probably her most true self, in my opinion, when she was just really honest about her motivation for being in the heist. And honestly, I think there was a part in the movie or the show where the professor was saying, I planned heist to talk to my dad who had died. And I think in her own way, Tokyo did the heist to reconnect with her lover. And I think that was just a powerful moment in the show because it was vulnerable, it was raw, and at some point it makes you understand Tokyo a little bit better and understand her recklessness and the thrill that she gets out of it. It's not just selfish as it may seem. It may be really her way of grieving because she doesn't have another way of grieving in a healthy way. And so, I just felt like really that was beautiful, a beautiful moment.
You telling me about that, I can kind of sense it had an impact on you.
Yeah.
Like the way you were talking about it.
Yeah, I just, I think a show like Money Heist, you really just have to leave the door open for whatever and however. And again, it was just like peeling back another layer to Tokyo because you really hadn't heard a lot about, the previous heist. You had just heard that in a heist, her boyfriend got killed. She made it out alive, right? You really didn't see that until... And I feel like it kind of just closed the door too, because Tokyo was the first person that you see the professor approach. And really the only person that you see him approach. And then you kind of come back at the end and see everything that led up to that moment for Tokyo, who is, again, in large part a narrator of the show. And so you just kind of, I don't know, I just feel like there was just a beautiful written moment where they just kind of closed a gap in her character development pre-heist. So, yeah.
So why should people see the show if they haven't already?
One, just to experience a different culture. It is a Spanish show based in Spain, and you get to see a lot of their culture, the soccer, the government, how the government reacts, and probably a lot of people can identify with shady governments. You get to see their version of cops and robbers, So just a different take on that. And just a beautiful take on just European approach to, what does life look like for me? How do people live there? I think characters like Berlin and his son is always an interesting trope. I think, just different ways people perceive love, different ways that people perceive someone to be a bad person, different ways that people perceive leaders. Because there's a couple leadership changes throughout the show. And so, just really, if you want to really open your palette to all that a person can be, personally and as a robber, I guess, if you will, I think that show is amazing, hands down.
Awesome. Well, Angela, this has been really great. Thank you so much for recommending the show because I hadn't seen it. And also thanks for talking with me about it. This has been great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a few years back, I pretty much defined myself by my work. And when you're working 60 to 75 hours a week, it's a trap that's easy to fall into. And I fell pretty hard. It negatively affected my physical and mental health. It hurt my relationships, and eventually it just plain burnt me out. And it took me years to realize Taylor, am not just one thing. So whether you're hustling to get your small business off the ground, or grinding away at content creation, or robbing a bank, I hope that you can make some time for yourself and your loved ones. Like Angela said, you need boundaries. If y'all want to hear more from Angela, please go check out her podcast, Honey and Hustle. The link is in the show notes. A bank vault size thank you to Angela for coming on the show, and an even bigger thank you to you for listening. And speaking of thanks, a very, very special thanks to Charles, Angel, Martin, Larry, and Ian for becoming the first patrons to support me and the Film Nuts podcast. As a patron, you can get access to behind-the-scenes goodies, advanced previews, and our official Discord community, aka the Nut House. There, we talk about all things storytelling, hang out with weekly watch-alongs of movies and TV shows, and discuss future topics for Film Nuts episodes, and even some cool video content. And if you want to know how you can become a patron, check out the show notes. This season's theme is brought to us by theDeeepEnd. If you want to get in touch with us, please reach out on Twitter at FilmNutsPodcast or send an email to hello@filmnutspodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our episodes, and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to let us know how we're doing. And thank you again so much for listening. Muchas gracias.